Welcome to the Great Basin Prescribed Fire and Smoke Transport Briefing for Wednesday, February 26th. Over the last 1 to 2 weeks, we've seen storms mainly move across the northern half of the Great Basin, and in some areas of Idaho, northeast Nevada, and northern Utah, we've seen above normal precipitation over the last 2 weeks, as well as portions of far western Nevada into the Sierra. Otherwise, still drier areas over the southern half of the Great Basin this last week, but we did have some precipitation over a week ago that did bring some much needed moisture to southern areas of the Great Basin temporarily. Over the last 72 hours, we've had new snowfall with a system that moved across Idaho and Wyoming a day or so ago. It brought 1 to 2 feet of snow into the higher elevations of central Idaho and up to about a foot of snow or so in western Wyoming. The snow depth is indicated on the right, and looking at the snowpack map, most areas over the northern half of the Great Basin are near normal for the time of year. There are a few small pockets where snowpack is above normal, but just barely. Over southern areas, a certainly much more dire situation for snowpack in the southern portion of the Great Basin heading into Arizona and New Mexico, although we did have some recent moisture which brought some of the snow levels up, for the most part still well below normal. The satellite image from this morning shows a strong ridge of high pressure along the west coast. This will start moving eastward across the Great Basin the next couple of days with continued warming temperatures and very dry conditions. Otherwise, some gusty winds as an area of low pressure moves across the northern Rockies, so we will see some breezy winds over the eastern half of the Great Basin today. So looking at the weather pattern for later today, again, you can see that ridge moving in with still very dry air in place today with very low relative humidities over the southern half of the Great Basin, along with those gusty north to northeast winds on the east side of the ridge as that system moves into the northern Rockies. You can see we'll have good dispersion over the southern and eastern half of Nevada and much of Utah. Transport winds show that we'll see some gusts around 30 miles per hour or 35 miles per hour in the southern areas of the Great Basin, otherwise very light winds across Idaho and western Nevada. Mixing heights remain low in the north and higher in southern areas. Looking at the temperatures today, they'll continue to climb, will remain at least 10 degrees above normal across much of the western half of Nevada, and we will see some warming today across Utah with most highs across the Great Basin in the lower elevations in the 40s and 50s, obviously 60s and 70s as you get into Nevada. Relative humidity will remain very low today. We will see single-digit relative humidity over the southern half of Nevada and into southern Utah and Arizona. As we move into Thursday, this ridge moves overhead, so one of the warmest days of the week. We'll see very warm and dry conditions. Winds will be lighter, so we'll only see good dispersion in southern areas where some of those easterly winds will still remain a bit breezy. The next area of low pressure off the west coast will start approaching the area later this week. Looking at our transport winds, again, those breezy east winds in the far south, otherwise very light winds, and low mixing heights in the north. And those low mixing heights, or those higher mixing heights, are really just tapered to the very south. Temperatures continue to warm. We'll see an uptick of temperatures, especially over the eastern half of the Great Basin, of at least 5 degrees and remaining very warm elsewhere. Those single-digit relative humidity remains on Thursday across much of the southern half of Nevada, with really teens in most other areas except for the far north. On Friday, that is when that area of low pressure off the west coast starts to move into California, so we will see mostly cloud cover for parts of Nevada. We could see a few light showers late in the day or the evening into the Sierra, but for the most part, just clouds moving in on Friday. Otherwise, winds will start to pick up a bit with southerly winds or southeast winds around that low, so we'll see some better dispersion over the southern half of Nevada into southwest Utah. And you can see those winds, those transport winds here on the left. Most of the gusts in the 20s to around 30 miles per hour, so nothing overly strong, but enough to improve dispersion. Mixing heights much higher over the southern half of the Great Basin. Temperatures remain warm on Friday before we see some cooling this weekend, and then relative humidity just does come up a bit as that low starts to move in with that increased cloud cover, so we'll see mostly relative humidity in the teens as opposed to a lot of single digits. 3-day precipitation, again, really nothing until we get into later in the day on Friday. Just some showers in the far western side of Nevada or the Sierra and very light, otherwise dry across the Great Basin. On Saturday, this low starts to track eastward across the Great Basin, so we'll see more cloud cover and a better chance of light showers over central areas of the Great Basin on Saturday. We'll also see the winds kick up a little bit, so we will see that improved dispersion. And then there's another area of low pressure off the west coast, which will quickly move in for Sunday into the early part of next week. And this is bringing a better chance of precipitation across the Great Basin starting Sunday, and then pushing that moisture across the area on Monday and into Tuesday. So definitely some opportunities for moisture as this weather pattern changes going into the weekend and next week. And also we'll see some better dispersion, so should be some good prescribed burning conditions in some areas depending on prescription criteria. Looking at the precipitation going into late Saturday through the weekend into early next week, you can see better chances of moisture in most areas, albeit fairly light. The only exceptions being some little bit heavier amount in the Sierra, and then maybe some spotty heavier showers in parts of northern Nevada and southern Idaho. And then moving into the middle part of next week, as that low continues to track eastward, we'll see some better moisture move over the eastern half of the Great Basin. Looking at the 7-day total, it looks like most areas will at least see some light showers. The far southern area of Nevada or southern Utah into Arizona may be the only spots that really don't get any precipitation. But again, at least some cloud cover and higher humidity. And then we will see some increases to the snowpack in some of these areas in the Sierra and maybe northern Utah. The 8 to 14-day outlook, taking us from March 5th through the 11th, shows this continued cooler and wetter pattern, this pattern change where we continue to see areas of low pressure move through the Great Basin, bringing us cooler temperatures, moisture, and some wind will continue at least through the middle of the month. And it looks like these storms do get a bit wetter as we get into that second week of March. That concludes the webcast for today. Check back on Friday for the latest updates.